The Italian island of Poveglia is one of the most haunted places in Europe, and today we are going to tell you all about it. In the 18th century, plague was spreading through Venice. The only way to stop the epidemic from growing any further was to get rid of the sick and dying. So they did. They gathered up anyone who had been exposed to the sickness and sent them away to an island in the Venetian Lagoon called Poveglia. This was originally a small farming community, but they had no other choice. So they left the villagers on the island with enough food to last them a few weeks, and then they sailed away themselves, never to return. Now, we've heard stories like this before, and we know how they usually go. The people who were left behind on the island built a shelter out of the wood from their homes, and they waited to be rescued. But after 3 weeks, their food supplies started running low, and those that had died from the plague began to die of starvation. But that's not where the story ends, because according to legend, once they had all died, the island was visited by hordes of rats. These rats were huge, some as big as cats, and they carried with them the plague bacteria, which killed even more people on the island. And so it went on for years, the rats coming back every year to infect anyone who had survived. Eventually, though, word got around Venice that the island was cursed and nobody would go near it. For over 200 years, Poveglia remained uninhabited until recently when plans were made to turn it into a luxury resort. Of course, this meant that someone had to go back to the island and clear it of any remaining buildings or debris so construction could begin. As soon as the first person set foot on the island, though, they realized that something was very wrong here. There was a thick fog everywhere, and even though the sun was shining brightly overhead, they couldn't see more than a few feet in front of them. When they tried to call out for help, their voices seemed to be swallowed by the mist. And when they turned to leave, they found that the path back to the mainland had vanished. They ran around the island calling for help until they finally found another boat and were rescued. But when they told their rescuers what had happened, they were laughed at and told to try again tomorrow. But the next day, the same thing happened. And the day after that, and the day after that. This continued on for weeks until eventually it was decided that the island was just too dangerous to go anywhere near. It was abandoned once more and left alone to whatever dark force resided there. We know that we have all heard ghost stories before, but sometimes it can be difficult to separate fact from fiction. Are the ghosts real, or are they just figments of our imagination? Well, there are some ghost stories that are rooted in reality, like the one we've just told you about. There are many places around the world where paranormal activity has been reported. Some say that these are simply tall tales designed to scare tourists or locals alike. Others believe that there really are some places where the veil between our world and the next is at its thinnest. In fact, they call these places vortexes or portals or gateways. One such place is the island of Poveglia off the coast of Italy. In 1793, Venice was struck by a terrible plague. Within months, thousands of people had died and the city was in chaos. The government decided that the best course of action would be to exile the sick and dying to a small island in the lagoon. When they arrived, they found a small village that had been abandoned some time ago. The houses were empty and the fields were overgrown. The villagers had fled, leaving the island to become a ghost town. The government built a lazaretto, a place for the sick to be quarantined, and brought in food and water for the exiles. They also brought in doctors and nurses to take care of the sick and dying. But within weeks, the situation had become desperate. The disease was spreading quickly among the exiles, and many were dying each day. The doctors and nurses were overwhelmed and didn't know what to do. The plague continued to spread throughout the island, and soon everyone brought in had died. But this wasn't the end of the story. Legend has it that the island was then overrun by rats. Thousands upon thousands of them came from somewhere deep within the earth, drawn to the scent of death. They lived in the walls and under the floorboards of the abandoned houses, feasting on the dead. To make matters worse, these weren't ordinary rats. They were huge, some as big as cats, with sharp teeth and claws that could rip human flesh to shreds. The rats carried the plague bacteria with them wherever they went, infecting anyone who came into contact with them. It is said that the island was cursed, that something evil lived there that drew the rats and the plague. No one knows for sure what this could be, but many believe that it was the spirit of a woman who had died on the island many years ago. Her name was Isabella, and she was the daughter of the island's former owner. When the island was taken from her father and given to the government to be used as a quarantine zone, she refused to leave. She fought against the soldiers sent to evict her and her family. And when they finally managed to drag her out of her house, she placed a curse on the island. Some say that Isabella's spirit still lives on the island, along with the ghosts of all the people who have died there. The island is now uninhabited, and for good reason. No one wants to live there, not after what happened in the past. But sometimes, when the fog rolls in and the wind blows just right, people can hear the screams of the dying and the laughter of the rats. Another scary story comes from the island of Poveglia, which lies just off the coast of Venice. This island is home to the largest mental hospital in Europe. It is said that the island is haunted by the spirits of those who died there, including the ghosts of children who were experimented on by the doctors. One day, a group of friends decided to explore the abandoned hospital. As they walked through the halls, they could feel a cold presence with them. They could hear whispers and footsteps, and they could see shadows moving in the corners of their eyes. Suddenly, one of the friends stopped in his tracks. He had seen something in the distance, something that looked like a little girl in a Victorian nightgown. Before anyone could stop him, he had already run towards the apparition. The rest of the group stood there frozen, watching as the figure slowly faded away. Just when they thought it had vanished completely, it reappeared in another room. The little girl was standing at the end of a hallway, and as she turned around, they could see her face. It was pale and gaunt, and her eyes were wide and empty. Before anyone could move, the girl began to walk towards them, her feet making a dragging sound on the floor. The group panicked and ran for the hills, not stopping until they were far away from the hospital. What they saw on that island will haunt their dreams forever. As we come to the end of this terrifying tale, we must ask ourselves, are these stories true? Could there really be such a place as an island full of ghosts and demons? Or are these just scary stories that we tell ourselves to keep us in line? What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. If you want to hear more about haunted places, then stay tuned for more updates.